All right, everybody, welcome back. This is November 14th. It is a Tuesday. Today's discussion is going to finish up our economic talks on the 1920s economy. Today's discussion is going to be mostly about credit, how credit can positively impact an economy, which we talked about in the 1920s, how it helped people spend money and what spending does to an economy, but also how it can be negative to our own personal finances, using credit too much as to, say, going into debt. So the bell ringer question I asked is, what items can you say are bought mostly on credit or by credit cards today? We had answers from like washing machines, furniture, cars, clothing, shoes, all the stuff that could be purchased through credit that people buy normally with a card in these stores. It could also be anywhere a card is accepted. Technically, they accept credit or debit. Again, the debit versus credit thing is something we can get to a little bit later. I'll show you a resource that you can get to. But then I asked the question, what would happen if credit completely disappeared? And most people argued it would be a tragic disappearance from our lives. So when we look at this theory of credit disappearing, what would possibly happen? Again, it's all in theory. I don't think credit's going anywhere. But people kind of speculated that it's going to be, pretty much it's going to take a big chunk out of our economy in terms of what we expect our economy to do for us, and how it's going to help us, regain confidence in our own ability to spend money and our ability to make money. But credit really kind of pushes this forward because people now are spending more than they probably would have without credit. So, and what that does to an economy is something that really can be seen on the first question of the worksheet from 14.2, that pink worksheet that we have. If you look at that cycle of the economy from spending to increasing profits, which means increasing salaries or wages, which increases spending, that cycle within itself, can definitely be hampered if you take credit out of the picture. I mean, people spend less, which means companies' profits go down, which means they can't afford to hire more people. In fact, most likely they will do the opposite and fire people. All right, so, and then when they get fired, they're less likely to spend. So that going back and forth kind of lets you know, what would happen if credit disappeared. Because if a consumer economy is one driven on spending, credit's gone, we don't spend. And thus our economy isn't driven anymore. So, something we can look at here as to what happens with credit. And again, the idea of buy now, pay later, that's what makes credit, so interesting at this point in our economy today. All right. Now, also what I do here in class is I give people a chance to take the pictures of the topics for the 1920s quiz. I give them the picture to take the picture of this on the screen in class. But if you want to go to Canvas, the very bottom of the page, I also signed a quiz on Canvas, open now, and we'll close on November 20th, 11:59. You can take that, download this, and it'll pop up pretty much into something, not that, but it will download into a document that you can see the topics that are exactly the same as is here. All right. So the quiz is open now on Canvas. If you go through these, you will need the yellow graphic organizer on the red square. You will need the notes sheet, front and back. It's a white sheet for notes. Harding Coolidge, those notes, and then you also need the pink worksheet we worked on the past few days regarding the consumer economy of the 1920s. So those are the three things you will need to help you kind of go through this material and answer the multiple choice questions for this quiz. All right. So I'll just give you that heads up that the quiz is open now on Canvas and you can take it whenever you see fit. Next we review is the idea of buying goods on credit and what that can do to our economy. We don't talk about the process of credit. Buying goods on credit allows a cardholder to pay for the goods and services based on the holder's promise to pay for them. You know how the transaction works. You give a clerk or a cashier your credit card, and you buy the goods with that card. You get to take them home with you, and you don't pay a single dime at that point until the credit company sends home a bill. All right. Now, the issuer of the card creates a revolving account. For instance, let's say MasterCard. MasterCard creates a revolving account that money can be put into and taken out of based on payments. So again, anytime you make a payment, money is removed from that account. Anytime you make an expense, money will go into that account. So it's revolving constantly. That creates a line of credit from the user. It can be used for a payment to a merchant or as a cash advance to the user. So any which way people decide to use that, they can make that happen. However, they do promise to pay that back, and that's the big deal. Again, not one dime is transferred until the buyer receives a monthly bill for one large payment to the company, allowing that line of credit. That's essentially how credit works. What I then do is I go into one video in class, but I put a second one up here on Canvas so you can understand the differences between credit and debit, what that is all about, and you can watch that video there up here. So just click on that. Essentially, that video opens up. You'll be good to go. And then also I have a video on store credit cards. Credit cards you can get through like Macy's, Target, Kohl's, all that stuff. And what are the differences of those cards and what do they offer that maybe like MasterCard or Discover doesn't offer. All right. When we review this and go through these discussions, I do want to point out that, going through this process, there is a positiveness to credit and what it does. Obviously, it encourages much more spending. Imagine our holiday season that's coming up now with people that buy gifts for everybody else. Excuse me. Everyone that buys gifts for one another, they probably wouldn't buy as much if they didn't have credit, because only using the cash value of what you have, people don't have a lot of cash on hand all the time. They usually pay all their bills, and whatever they have left, they probably put on credit, or they spend it in some way somehow. So there's not a lot of money left over in terms of what people are willing to spend after all their bills are paid for. So the problem is, if you use credit, you can have some really big drawbacks, because if you keep using that same card over and over and over again, that's just adding money up into an account. It's crediting an account, which means you have to pay it back later. A debit means it's taking away from your current bank account. So when people spend money on credit, it almost appears like that money grows on trees for them, because they can keep using that expense, paying for stuff over and over and over and over again, until essentially they see their bill and they say, holy cow, I didn't spend that much, but yeah, you really did. Look at everything that you spent, and it adds up really quick. And credit, sometimes you lose track of that. If you're really good at managing a budget and managing your spending, that's what credit's all about. But again, the problem comes in the 1920s. This is why it completely relates. In the 1920s, consumers were willing to put more money of their annual income towards debt, meaning like they were going into debt more. Let's say someone makes $100,000 a year. Okay, it's a lofty salary, I get it, but it's an easier way to get the percentages. From 1918 to 1920, Americans put 4.2% of their annual income into debt, meaning they went into debt 4.2% of their annual income, which means $4,200 of $100,000. They put that into debt, and it's pretty reasonable. 4.2% of their annual income into debt. Most Americans probably handle that over the course of a year. However, in 1929, almost a decade later, the amount of debt goes up and almost doubles. All right, to 9%. All right, so you're looking at $9,000. In some cases, you got even higher than $10,000. So, and the issue comes with this is that it enhanced financial innovation, which provided more channels for technology and also in other dynamic sectors. But these innovations began to make spending a little bit easier. As spending became easier, you need income to catch up with that. If people can spend, they need the income to match what they are spending in order to keep that budget. If they spend more than what their income really is, then that is exactly the problem. And that's what happens in the 1920s. Americans end up spending way more than their incomes increase. The spending and income increases, which is fine. In the consumer economy, that cycle, the more people make, the more they spend. That's what we hope in the consumer economy. However, in the 1920s, it only happens to where the consumer buys more than what they're really making. And that is the problem. It creates a bubble, all right? It creates a bubble, and like most of the things, bubbles eventually pop. To give you some stats here, 1925, consumer credit that is outstanding by each consumer in the United States, not on average, but in total, every consumer in the United States has over $1.38 billion outstanding. That's total in the United States. I mean, that's money that consumers are not paying back to their credit from where they're getting the credit from. In 1929, it reaches $3 billion. All right, so there's a major problem in terms of what people are willing to go into debt for. 60% of all cars are bought on installment payments in the 1920s. 80% of all radios are bought on installment payments. They're buying now, paying later in mass amounts we've never seen before, and consumers see this confidence in the economy because they're going to keep having a job. They're going to keep being able to pay something off over small increments over a period of time. So, and by 1929, $7 billion of consumer goods are purchased on credit, which is a massive, massive amount. Obviously, it's much more today, but obviously our monetary values are different based on inflation today. So, this is a major change that we look at when we look at buying goods on credit. There are some major problems that can be had, and that's what we looked at today in class. So what I ask you to do at the end of class, if you want to do this, you can pause this video, look at this prompt, and write it up and bring it into me when you're done. But as young Americans, what do you think of the use of credit cards, and the installment plan today? Write one positive comment about credit cards to support that statement with your experiences. All right. So give some experiences too. Give some detail behind this. And then write one negative comment as to how credit can negatively impact the economy eventually. All right. We talked about some of these problems here, and that's what credit does. Credit helps to fuel a consumer economy. However, Americans spend more than they're really making. That can be a major problem. And that's, that confidence doesn't last forever. All right. So that's all I have for today. This is what we finished the class with. If you're kind of interested in seeing some more of those stats, let me know. I can send you a document that I have that gives some of those stats for you. All right. Have a fantastic day. This is the last part of the politics and economics of the 1920s. Tomorrow we will pick up the social changes. How do people change with the economy, with the politics of that time period? What social changes occur in the United States? All right. Have a great day.